Okay, there you go. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. We're going to get started. We had a week-long workshop this week talking about the middle stations for the new Bern active station area planning. Got a lot of really cool and exciting things to share with you. Had a ton of participation. The boards you see on the side of the room over here have a sticker exercise that we've done. We've had a lot of online participation as well with some surveys we have live. They'll stay live for a couple of weeks, so we'll continue to get more feedback and input. But from the design workshop we've done, we're looking forward to sharing these recommendations with you. I'm Matthew Clem. I'm in the Raleigh City Planning Department, and we have Craig Splenard here leading a team of consultants from Stantec and other sub-consultants. So Craig, I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Great, thanks, Matt. I want to thank everybody for taking the time this week. It was really great to sit down with everyone, talk about future concerns, their ideas for new firms. So I hope we captured that. Know that everything you're seeing tonight is definitely draft form, but we're just trying to combine a whole bunch of information that we collected over the last week. We're going to have time for questions and everything. I want to work through a few of the slides, and then we'll get to that. So if you do have questions, we'll pause occasionally. I just want to make sure that we can get through the presentation and then be able to move forward. So Matt was saying we did have a lot of engagement today. We always like to go back where we were and how we got here. This really started in 2015 with the Weight Transit Plan and driving down everything from the BRT component, the actual development around transit study that really set that framework, the planning component of this. And you know, while the BRT is a part of this is really about the community around the BRT and moving that forward. We had a lot of stakeholders this week. I mean, everybody started here Monday. We also had a lot of people drop in over the week as well, so thank you for that. Our team was really busy looking at ideas. How do we express a lot of the concerns that we heard, a lot of the complex components that we're putting forward? The city has this online survey with over 60 people respond to these surveys, and there's really interesting results of this. They had this question about, are you fine with taller buildings and more change in your BRT? That means allowing a wide range of affordable housing options and more shopping and offices in the surrounding area. But I'd rather not see much change around. 94% of those over 60 people saying they would rather see some taller buildings. Deep affordability, how important is it to create deeply affordable housing opportunities for low and very low income households? 48% said very important, 29% said important, and 60% said somewhat important. We're also seeing, there we go. Sorry, I thought it was the second slide. 97% of people saying I'm fine with more change near BRT if it means improving walkability and reducing carbon emissions and air pollution. And that is one of our key components about growing around transit is that help to, you know, every little bit helps with climate and reducing our climate change and our carbon footprint. Priority transit and compact urban development play a key part. So everything we're doing here is about an above all strategy, not just on housing affordability, but also helping with climate change, helping with our traffic and transportation network, and making sure that we're growing logically and using the land logically within that. So it's great to see people also thinking about those components. We asked everybody to write vision statements, and thank you for people that did that. We were pulling out all these sort of phrases and words that we've heard from people, everything from, you know, making sure we replace the crepe myrtles with comparable nature. Where does the green go was a really big one. Historic preservation, a toast to our history. Keep zoning for high density, but zoning is a priority, not losing the integrity of the community. Keeping residential and community atmosphere, remain economically and culturally diverse, which I thought was a really great one, and also more mixed use. What we're going to show you next is sort of a draft vision statement for the middle stations. We did this for the western stations. We also did this for the eastern stations. So this is really about our community around the middle stations here. And we're going to ask you later in the survey whether we got this right or not. So our first thoughts on a vision statement are, our community is a garden in the city, highlighting the natural beauty of Raleigh. New growth must promote, enhance, and integrate into the forested groves that are a hallmark of our city of Oaks. Our community's transformation prioritizes place, thoughtful redevelopment, and the natural environment in order to grow together strategically. To us, this means ensuring all new development include new green spaces designed to welcome the entire community. As the corridor evolves, we see expansion of housing choices that blend into the established neighborhoods and offer a variety of price points, so all can benefit from our growing city. New Bern's role as a green gateway into downtown is enhanced through unique placemaking, neighborhood centers, and a strategic increase in density that can accommodate a wide variety of housing preferences and family types. I'm gonna pause here for a second. It's a lot of words. Any first reactions to that? So that was sort of our guidepost that we started working with this week. And we moved forward to the inspirations and ideas, what we heard from you. And this was stuff that we started talking about even on Tuesday night. The first is this idea of TOC nodes. Now, this little diagram here is just a diagram. It's not of New Bern, but it's this sort of idea that the length of New Bern and the middle stations, while the western stations have this tight urban grid of streets, the framework here really lends to more of a node of opportunities along the station areas. And so we want to find ways to understand how that happened. There are opportunities along that area of large parcels that are ready for redevelopment, everything from shopping centers to duplex village, but the city has purchased parts of that. And so we want to understand how that plays within that. But there are a lot of stable communities on the edges, and we want to make sure that we're transitioning to those as well. How do we get to the other side? There's a lot of conversation about stitching New Bern together, making sure those north-south connectivity pieces are really important. But there's a broader sort of bike network connectivity that's happening parallel to New Bern and other roads, trail systems, et cetera. And this idea of safe walks to and from schools and jobs, amenities, and transit are going to be really important moving forward with this plan. Nature, this is going to be a recurring theme. We keep hearing this from community. We want to put it in as much as possible. Where does the green go? How do we put it in? What does it look like? We're going to continue to work on that as we move forward. And then lastly is this idea of managing change. Where were we? Where are we today? Where are we going? How does that look like in the transitional form of the build form and moving forward in that sense? We also are hearing about housing affordability, housing needs, business vitality, business viability as well. We heard that in the western stations, we're hearing that in the eastern stations. And so we took a deeper dive into this. And I may ask Simone, if I don't get all this correct, you want to talk a little bit about this? So big picture, the Great American Move, and green is in migration markets, red is out migration markets. We're seeing the coastal cities, people are moving from the coastal cities into the south, Texas, Salt Lake City, Boise, even Indianapolis is seeing a huge growth. In Raleigh, we're seeing population growth exponentially and job growth as well. It's sort of matching it, obviously, within that. With that growth comes a lot of challenges, and so we started thinking about what can we do about it. You know, there's this huge pressures of development, huge pressures of change. What are the things that we're really going to need to move forward in our implementation plans and our strategies moving this forward? So I'm going to flip it over to Simone.
I've thought about it as tools, like in a bucket or a tool chest, where there's no one thing that will solve every problem, but you can pick and choose what you need and then apply it specifically to each kind of scenario. And some of the options we're looking, it's just like more supply and more options. That would help a lot with a lot of the trends that you're seeing. Funding, zoning, and just incentivizing specific outcomes. Additionally, we want to see what are the types of options we need to consider. We need to look at housing types. We need to look at what types of residents are here, who's coming, how can we make sure that's a good mix. And then how do we diversify the uses. Should it be all residential? Should we start doing that a little bit more commercial? Where are the commercial nodes can we add to that? Is it too much? Just really asking the questions, right? And then scale and context. New Bern is very specific. There's a specific feel. Everyone loves to say, we love the way it feels when we come here. So how can we make sure that we are setting up the framework to continue to get growth that makes sense within it? And so we started to create these narratives and stories from actual conversations and people who come in and just kind of express a lot of their opinions. And from that, we just made up these ideals basically of it's kind of a suburban location with some of the urban amenities. They're not far from downtown, so it doesn't have to be super, super dense, but more people are coming here. And so we need to actually make sure there are areas for those people to go, right? And then we're gonna stitch it all together. How do we take all those ideas? We know they're connected in some way. We know that they layer somehow, but how can we start to make that the New Bern version of that? It's not something we apply from New York or Atlanta. It's Raleigh, and it's more specifically here.
And I just want to pause here. This last piece is what we're continuing to sort of explore and here is knowing what to ask for and making sure residents that currently live here or want to live here understand their options, whether you're a homeowner or a renter. What are your options to participate in this growth? What are your options to remain in place over time? How do you make sure that if there's rental pressure on you, that you know what additional options are? And so education and information are a real big tenet of what we're going to be putting forward in some of our policy recommendations. So in summary, it's about an all above strategy. Affordable, what we know is we keep throwing this word around affordable housing, but what we know is affordable housing means a lot of things to different people. And so we want to make sure we're very clear in our policy recommendations of looking at those different components of both city policy, what that ultra low and that sort of mid-market piece are, even in the sort of what we would consider more market rate components. We know that growth is happening rapidly. We know that housing supply is needed. And existing residents need to be armed with information, understanding and the options that they have as well. And then ensuring that long-term affordability and business viability means that we need this sort of everything for everyone.
And so we came up with these community profiles just to get a better idea of the type of people are here and who might come here to get who's missing. And we kind of developed this really high level, but more understandable way to relate what is affordability. There are these terms like area median income. They're kind of loaded. They're a little bit unrelatable when you start talking about percentages. So what we try to do is say net income instead of your gross income. What do you see in your paycheck versus what they say you make at the end of the year when you file your taxes? Looking at what is your monthly debt. So just living expenses, things like transportation, dining out, utilities. We try to synthesize what those ranges might be for different people, as well as what you should pay. Now, the rule of thumb is that you shouldn't pay any more than 30% of your income, but we applied that setup again to your gross income. We took what that net income would be, calculated that value to see what someone should be paying at that bracket, at that level for these different scenarios. And then your home price, we had to kind of determine a range of what they could afford if certain things are true. In order to keep it simple, assume we have good credit, assume we have a certain amount of down payment, just so we can actually calculate something in here. And here you can see things. We talk about legacy residents. There are people who are already here, right? We really, really, really want them to stay here. In some of the Western stations, we talked about it, and there are people who've been here for 20 years. There are people who've been here for 2 years. There are people who've raised their kids and their families. All of them had a concern about staying in the neighborhood. All of them wanted to, and they said they love the diversity. They love the people with more experience who could tell them there is an eye doctor if you cross the street and go here. They like that. They don't want to lose it. And so some of the concerns were just, what can you afford? And so you look at someone like a legacy renter, maybe they're a teacher, they don't make a ton of income, maybe they have a child. And so you see very quickly once we calculate this affordability by the standards we put out on, there is no way that they can own a home in the Bern. So that would inform us that maybe we need to find more affordable rental properties and things of that nature. Additionally, there are homeowners, some people who might be on a fixed income, but we know that regardless of the price change at home and property taxes, their income is not very likely to rise with that. And so how do we protect them? Or how do we give them options? Maybe they do want to downsize. Can they afford to buy within the neighborhood? Just a question we're asking. Institutional, there are students, there are schools, there are alumni couples who want to settle here after school. Maybe they don't have a lot of income, but really high debt. And then faculty and staff as well. And then the next kind of group are those newer residents. So it could be a young family starting out. It could be young professionals or who else. There are a lot of industries coming, there are tech companies coming, they're not far from downtown, but it's still a very nice neighborhood. And so it would be very attractive for people to be close and still have something that's very nice.
I just want to highlight that these are just sort of vignettes. They're not meant to be precisions, but what it's highlighting is, you know, in that 30% principle, is that is the sort of what the financial experts would say is that is your typical component. You can start to see it. Obviously, no one's going to be paying $250 a month, or that's the reality, but that means that they're going to have to start going beyond the 30% to meet those needs within that. So we're just trying to test the system, and we'll continue to push down into those implementation pieces. So within that residential gap too, we're looking at those options. And again, it's about that above the ball strategy here. It's understanding development roadblocks, understanding what's allowed. I want to just note too, the city just passed the TOD overlay this week. So that will continue to be applied within this process, and it's going to be very sort of next steps within our piece.
What did it pass?
The TOD overlay.
What is that?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's the new sort of overlay that replaces the.
Oh, you said T-O-D.
TOD.
I thought you said T.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Mask pronunciation.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at both old tools and new strategies, these districts and the overlay. So this is sort of orienting ourselves and how we're moving forward in our recommendations. But we also want to pause a little bit on business vitality and growth. We keep hearing, you know, businesses that are existing in the community, how do we stay in the community? We want to make sure that we're lifting legacy businesses and residences, but also within that component, identifying any roadblocks and policy, funding, and education and partnerships. Building trust with the city, with the community, understanding what that change looks like, how do we create that growth that supports a diverse community. One is creating a toolkit for that to promote and support the housing diversity. That means packaging up all options that are available, whether that's a grant program or the explainers on the affordability piece, partnering with developers and making sure that they're communicating when these are coming on board and what those options are. We're going to look at evaluating and recommending any adjustments to city policies and procedures to make sure that new development meets the guidelines as far as design and execution, but it's getting to market in a quicker way. And then working with the city to establish resources with community builders, nonprofits, and local banks to collate these ideas and making sure that they're all talking together as well, so that they can go back out into the community and communicate their options, and so people understand what's available. And we're going to shift from housing and then talk a little bit about mobility as well.
Awesome. So Craig and Simone did a great job talking about, you know, the development strategy and the approach. As an engineer, I like to think about transportation and land use like supply and demand equation, right? So the demand side would be land use development growth. And then the supply side would be infrastructure, like transportation, lanes and the like. So I'm going to hone in a little bit of that, spend a little bit of time, because we really can't have one without the other. So some of the key takeaways that we've seen and heard from folks, and it kind of transcends from when we did the first, the western side of the section, but really safety is the key in a sense. Not only safety in terms of crashes and reducing crashes, but also security, right? We want to do comfortable at night, taking a walk or riding a bike. So safety, and really in particular at intersections, speeding and slowing down cars, not only New Bern, but some of the other radio routes in your community. And then closing the gap on sidewalks, but also north and south connection through it will become a barrier. So some of our mobility options, when everything else is tie goes to the pedestrian, right? Shouldn't that be the most logical explanation of why helping mobility in your community? And when you think about that, we really want to connect people to places. All the wonderful things of development that we're advocating for, as well as the BRT and the development around there, we think of that as our first mile, last mile connection. So that's really important. Connectivity is important as well. So I'm going to jump right into it. Our system level plan really talks about all modes of transportation and really those folks with disability. We actually saw a couple folks in wheelchair trying to get across New Bern, which is an extreme challenge for them, considering the speed differential that they're facing. So walkability, bikeability, transit, meaning the first mile, last mile connections, as well as cars and deliveries and trucks. So I'll just walk through a couple of those key elements, but I'll kind of ask you to come up here after because it's not hard to see, but we really honed in on some essential or key corridors, both east, west, as well as north and south. Key elements like Bill Burney, which we heard a lot of good accolades. The city did a great job, honestly, of kind of repurposing some of that asphalt, making it more bike friendly and protecting the intersections. We also have Pool Road, and some folks kind of push back a little bit on the painted bike lanes on there, but trying to make it more safe because it's kind of flat and straight. People like to race through there. And really closing the gaps between some of those critical intersections. So you'll see in here certain treatments like mid-block crosswalks that are safe getting these people across, right? Key intersections, we want to make them predictable, not only on New Bern Avenue, but some of the key intersection treatments like New Bern, King Charles, as well as the connection at Pool Road and some of the other ones. So you'll see different symbology that talks about key intersection treatments. Even traffic calming. We have a roundabout actually at the intersection of Noel and King Charles, only because it's a horrible scheme. We hear a lot of complaints about that. We will want to make intersections predictable. Now, this is on the eastern side of our segment, but the reality is we're trying to do better for those folks that are trying to get across the street. So this is kind of what it looks like today. So some of the things that we're contending we're facing with is sweeping moves, like this one right here. Remember, this intersection is US 64 business. 20 years ago, it was US 64 Main. So all of these lanes were put in many, many years ago, but it has never changed because, you know, after that, and when the bypass was put in, a lot of that traffic was shifted. And so we never revisited that, like the sweeping right turn lane, which is hard for a pedestrian to get across. So our thought was to close it over here and allow, you know, I'm just kind of show like a WP50, like a school bus, how it circulates through there. But ultimately, providing all of those key elements at high quality intersections, those intersections that have signals, right? Pedestrian countdowns, ADA ramps, high visibility crosswalk, pedestrian lighting, and the like, even the refuge. So when you look at the street level, this is Pool Road, and we're looking east, right? And you can see this young lady right here. I'm actually stopped on that road, but she stopped there because she thought it was going to race and run her over, you know, when you think about it, because it's flat and straight, and no one really pays attention to that pedestrian that's on the side here. So she was very patient. So what would that look? And there's a lot of curb cuts here too. What would that look? We invest little public infrastructure in this to protect that crossing there by including a pedestrian level or pedestrian refuge by the use of pocket medians, not a continuous median, but something that would slow down and provide some sense of enclosure with some verticality, with some cute trees, maybe not this glorious, but something you get the picture. And then really delineating that crossing as well as those bike lanes right now. It's hard to envision this unless you see a concept developed like this. Another one is the Crabtree Creek, which is a beautiful asset to have, but honestly, it's hard for you folks to get to. We know, we understand that. And then the city's doing a wonderful job trying to bring that west and connect it into Mill Verde as well. So there's a gap here, and this is what it looks like. So this is what your trailhead looks like. Celebrate that, right? But the reality is, this is a very wide street here too. So just imagine what it would look like if you put in a nice entryway to kind of celebrate that trailhead with some pedestrian level lighting, right? And to kind of delineate that pathway as well as either a side path or a cycle track to allow safe access and circulation via 2 feet or 2 wheels. Right? So just some concepts might look a little glorious, but it's still good. Pear tree. This is actually looking up and northbound. It goes up an incline, and it's very narrow. And so it's about 27 feet. But you notice on this side, there's no driveway curb. That's why, that means the internal street, the residents back up to this, okay? But it provides a great opportunity for a separated protected bikeway. This is my little markup here, but to understand what that looks like, and then what you transcend into. And the reason why we're putting a dedicated uphill is because we don't have a whole lot of room, but we also don't want to move those curves. Moving curves costs money. Why? Because it impacts drainage, and there goes the cost. So we're doing a lot of these low-hanging fruit, doing more with less model, and in terms of improving bicycle and walkability throughout the corridors. Okay. So as we move ahead, this is one of the critical intersections, right? We talk about the gap, and it's the gap really between King Charles and all the way up to Pear Tree that we're talking about. And it's about 2,500 linear feet, meaning when the BRT gets in place, someone has to walk, if you think about a quarter mile, like 1,300 feet, someone has to, that's a 5-minute walk shed. Someone has to walk 8 minutes out of the way just to cross it. And we know no one's gonna do that. Because today, you guys are leapfrogging across and running into the median and then running the rest of the way. Those that can actually run. So what we would like to do is work with our PRT folks and our engineer and look at providing a cross access somewhere around here. This is actually Longview, and it's a plan view, if you think about it. And this is actually city-owned property here, at least this part is here. It's kind of a tough area to develop, right? And so what we would advocate is that really to enhance that, number one, and create a nice activity node. It could be bike friendly, another bike share program, an activity yoga in the park, or activity for kids, exercise, workout, you name it. But really a nice active park. And then we can incorporate a mid-block crossing in there. But it has to be signalized, what we call a hawk signal. And it actually stop cars and kind of slow them down. Because honestly, that curve right there, people are going probably 60 or 65 miles an hour. And maybe some of the folks in this room, including myself. Why? Because it's flat and straight, it looks like a driveway. Okay, so we're trying to slow those phones down by doing some built-in traffic calming. So this is what it would look like at street level. So we're actually looking east, think about it, okay? So that's before, and that's the after. And ideally, we are advocating for an actual signal. It's called a hot signal. It's really for pedestrians. It'll only be activated once you push that button, or once you have a kickbox when a bicyclist wants to. So it wouldn't be continuous, but it'd be a great opportunity to slow folks down as they come around that corner. As we move ahead, this is King Charles at Norwell. I think this is Norwell right here. You're all familiar, really bad intersection because it's all skewed. As you can see, it's a 4-legged, but it's really horrific. Skew as you're driving through there. Coming into this intersection, no one knows who has the right of way. There's no signal, there's no actuation, there's no signage to tell people who has the right of way. Our recommendation, because there's a lot of speeding that we heard along King Charles, is to put in the #1 traffic calming device that we have at our facility, and that's a neighborhood circle. This would be like a 90-foot. We try to keep it out of property. I think for the most part, we were able to do that. We can redesign it and move it around just to make sure that folks can come into it and either do the U-turn if they want to or drive on through, but they have to slow down. Because the #1 rule with roundabout, no one blasts through there more than 15 or 20 miles an hour. You just can't do it unless you have the group. Just another good idea for slowing down cars on the straight. Last but not least, the most important challenge that we had is the interchange at 440. Please raise your hand if you think that's a difficult interchange to go through. To walk through. Now imagine, hold on, now imagine walking through it. How many of you have walked through it? Raise your hand. You have walked through it.
Yes.
Took my life in my hand. You did. Just like this person?
Yeah.
and just like this person, walking in the gutter and walking completely across. And you know what's funny about that? Ironically, it's not funny, is there is a goat path all along it. Because multiple people do it a day, whether it's service workers that are going up to get fast food or get some food, or going from A to B to get to their work, and they don't have a car. Real important. So one of the ideas that we are really looking at two options for getting through there if you're not behind a wheel of a car. One of them is to repurpose this bridge. It's 8 lanes, right? But when you look at the narrowest point in here, it's only 2 lanes. And a lot of that laneage is due for auxiliary lanes and coming off of the interchange. Let me show you what that looks like. Here's what it looks like today, right? Every movement that you have in here, every single one, ramp or loop, is free flow. That means they don't have to stop. And if you try to walk through there, imagine those folks that are going up through here, trying to get to wherever they're going, they have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 free-flowing movement cars, and probably 20,000 vehicles in 30 minutes, or 2,000 vehicles in a half hour. So what we want to do, take a look at, is slow them down. As a driver, I'd rather be moving and I can yield to pedestrians as opposed to stop and go. So our thought is to do this: reorient that loop and reorient those ramps so cars have to yield to pedestrians. It's that simple. Repurpose that outside lane and delineate it with physical barriers so people have 10 or 11 feet that they can go east to west in a safe zone. What does that look like on the street level? So I'm looking west of that. So this is looking towards Yonkers, if you're familiar, right? This is the loop, and all that is a auxiliary lane. What does that look like, right? Delineate it, repurpose that lane, and then really do a good job of protecting people, okay? Because there's a lot of traffic that goes through. You're still maintaining those 3 lanes on both sides, but allow those folks safe passage as they get there. Awesome. So we're going to talk about open space. Any questions with transportation? We get kind of excited. Here you go, buddy. So Eric's going to talk about open space and really connecting with another key destination. Parks.
Well, I have a wonderful opportunity to actually spend time with the Leafy Green neighborhoods of the middle station areas. And wow, so definitely we're inspired by the access to nature that you have in private spaces, unfortunately. So the key takeaways, there are actually very few active parks in the area. So most homes want to have access to a playground, for example, within walking distance. So there are very few places that you can actually be in as a person in public space. So that is something that we really need to think about. So opportunities to enhance nature, seek ways to create safer walks through the existing spaces that provide beauty and access to nature. We say use green and blue assets to connect the BRT stations with the Craddock Creek Trail. So how do we actually tie in the system of creeks and lakes to the Craddock Creek Trail? And our approach is to basically say, seek the win-wins between nature and people. So do what's best for nature, and then do what's best for people. And obviously, we need to work with private partners, the HOAs and the Raleigh Country Club, to accomplish a lot of that potential that is there. So, we have these environments that are somewhat secluded. The edges of these lakes are obscured by the kudzu that's growing there. So how do we actually open that up as an amenity for the HOA to actually celebrate? And so, this is just from my walks along the lake edges. There's a lot of beauty there to access. As well as the creek that goes along Enbo High School. That is a missing amenity in the community. So we do have some parks. So these are actual these are the parts that actually have an amenity. The green spaces, some of them are private, but you can see that there's this wide swath in the middle. It doesn't have any dedicated open space or a community enjoyment for, reading a book, having a picnic, for children to play in. So, but you notice here where the lakes are. So that is an incredible opportunity. Mike was speaking about that triangle here at Longview Lake Drive. Maybe we can think of ways to actually make Longview Lake Drive and Albemarle Avenue easy to walk. But how do we do that? Seeking a win-win with nature and communities. There are a lot of open spaces here that don't actually have an amenity, but they are dedicated open spaces. They're actually created by the, Longview Gardens Master Plan. They're still there and they're available. So we need to activate those. And, and we need to also connect to the trail system. So, the gaps, the main gaps will be Albemarle Avenue and Longview Lake Drive. So we need to think about those streets. And so here, for example, is Longview Lake Drive, the dam. What if we were to create a boardwalk trail along the edge of it? And just some ideas here. For example, there's an oak field with this wonderful oak here. It's at the lake edge, but you can't actually see the lake when you're here. What if we were to open it up, restore the lake edge with greenery, and have a boardwalk trail or something? That could be the next opportunity for a park in this area. And of course, that will take the city coordinating with the HOA. And so what can we do with, Albemarle Road, Avenue and Longview Lake? You can see here that it's very, very dangerous for pedestrians to walk along here. But what if we were to think of it as a country lane? And just create soft edges and actually create a diet. Pedestrians can still tuck into the greenery if they need to, or passing car, but it really starts to slow things down, especially at the curves. And we also can connect to the hospital better. This is sort of the pedestrian environment we'll have to address. But notice the potential here, to connect to the trail systems.
is there with the existing built form. It's a rather large, it's about 50 feet in certain areas, it fluctuates. But that provides us a new opportunity to inject new trees on the backside of those sidewalks. It allows developers to have that orientation and promote that walkability through here, so it has that shade cover and interacts with the BRT in that sense too. So transition, so we just took one parcel at that key intersection there with the BRT station, and we looked at what might that be and how might that fit within. This responds to those deep setbacks with a large side yard buffer, a lower scale development. This sort of meets that intent of the TOD overlay concept in that context. I may call on Maggie and Amber to explain this a little bit more too, but you know, we're looking at that idea of how do we within the sort of large lot context make sure that there's the right transitional components, that there's opportunities within those existing pieces, that they're responding to the architectural there, but always in line with that sort of deep setback component, and you know, a base scale of 3 stories with potentially 2 stories if it includes that bonus height component of transform. So this is the shopping center. The idea here is that the edges would be repositioned or redeveloped in a lower scale or medium scale mixed use of 5 to 7 stories, maybe some different live-work unit or typologies. But maybe part of it, look where the Alamo Draft House is, may retain or remodel and be part of that sort of experiential component that's being sort of a little mini Main Street within that context, Restaurant Row. But again, that idea of a very large setback along New Bern, rather than in the public right away, that it's a private right away that injects a lot more density or a lot more landscape within that context. And then lastly is that idea of redevelopment. This concept program is that sort of duplex village, New Bern Ave, Raleigh Boulevard, Pool Road, that looks at a multi-phase sort of restitching the urban framework here, and everything from sort of 5 to 7 stories right at the edge of the development, and tapering down into a series of townhome, and then even on Pool Road, another set of apartment buildings. Again, multi-phase. The opportunity here is about 1,000 units to fit within this concept, both apartment style and townhomes, mix of market, senior, and affordable options. Because of the land ownership mix in this area, there are those opportunities as well. Moving further down New Bern Avenue, sort of in the Wake Bend area, again, that idea of transformation, redevelopment, and we have this sort of pink area that is the medical district itself, and that may take on a life. We're still exploring that with Wake Bend. But we have one site here that we just sort of explored throughout the week, and talking with the landowners, this piece here. Yeah, so the Walgreens sits here, and there is some land availability. There's a small parcel over on the side as well. There's a road, but maybe closing that road and allowing land development to interact with the pathway itself. The idea here is this sort of continuum of care, senior housing from active end of life, multi-phased, but could taper down the hillside here and provide that sort of density that's near the transit center itself. So setting the stage, we've done a lot of sort of conceptual design. We have a lot more work to do in this sense, a lot of discovery. We just want to walk through sort of what's next and where we're moving forward to. We have these buckets of land use and zoning amendments, significant redevelopments in the area along the corridor. This nodal development concept will include regulatory and policy recommendations as well. And then looking at applying the TOD overlay across the corridor here. That includes the density bonuses for affordable housing and supporting dense walkable environments that recently was passed this week. We're looking at the updates to the transportation map. So Mike's team and its great work this week looking at all the mobility pieces. We're providing strategic recommendations there. The future capital projects, so everything that we're talking about here is capital need within this, understanding those pieces and helping prioritize those within a matrix. And then lastly is the urban design goals and further studying, just making sure we have more work to do on this. These are initial ideas. We can't get everything done in 4 days, but I think we really tapped into a lot of really interesting ideas within this. I just want to remind everybody, this is not finished. We have a lot of work left to do. This was really about creating ideas. We're going to have the surveys still up on our website. There is a pet and bike safety summit next Friday, 1 to 4 p.m. Find that information on our website here. In the winter, we're going to come back with draft plans with all this stuff as we sort of vet these ideas a little bit further, refine it, and into more formal plans. But I thank everybody for your time this week. I know there's a lot of information here. Happy to discuss and converse. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? Information overload?
How do you envision the surveys and the feedback to happen? Because people will want to give it.
Online. We've been using survey 123 as well as sorry, what is it called?
Public input.
Public input.
Public input.
Is there a way to get away from only surveys and start making it more, here's our comments, here's our thoughts, or is that too kids that you guys can react to?
Yeah, well, there are open-ended comments and we can take that feedback for sure. Yeah,
Because there's obviously some familiar faces in here, there's a lot more people who aren't here, we're gonna want to be able to get this, I know it's being recorded, so we're gonna want to share this with people and be able to comment on it.
for sure.
Yeah, and also once there's some more refined concepts, we'll do some additional public outreach at that point. Honestly, I think sometimes it's easier to be able to see a little bit more developed concept and react to that and provide some comments. So there's definitely multiple opportunities for additional comment or refinement.
Yes, sir.
Could you share how many folks have come out kind of throughout the week? If I understand it correctly, you've been set up here at Roberts Park. Yes, sir. Like every day, Monday through Thursday, from like 10 a.m. to about 5. And then you were set up, I think, at Tarboro Road, is that right?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago for the Western Station.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, because I'm trying to sort of combine the folks who are here right now, like I live a few blocks away, and so I'm grateful to be here. And I'm grateful to see some folks here. But I know that there's like thousands of people who live in and around. And so I'm just curious if you have a ballpark number on how many folks have actually come through from Tarboro Road to Roberts Park. If you have like a ballpark.
I do. So in person, we've had probably around 30 people in here. And then our online engagement is that one of the surveys is up to over 60. And we'll keep that input mechanism happening for a few weeks. And so it's not cooked, it's not done.
Yeah.
That door is still open.
Yeah.
So there are continuous opportunities to still do this very activity.
Yeah.
And that's happening.
And
Okay, so-
I would add that also in addition to that, at the workshop at Tarboro, we had another 50 or 60 and a housing summit where we dive more directly into the questions about affordability and how we can address that. Got another 50 or 60 in the videos. We've been recording a lot of the presentations as we are tonight, and each of those has gotten 200 or 300. So I think there are a lot of people who they more want to just understand what's going on and may just, that's enough, or may see that and then come in and comment. So all told, we haven't really totaled it, but it's definitely several hundred people have interacted with this process in some way.
We also have this visual preference survey, which is quite detailed. So we have this in person, and as of today, this has only been up for a week online. We've got about 14 respondents to this as well. And we want to continue that. I think there's going to be a bit of a social media push post workshop. There's a lot of information, and so because these are very, very complicated, we're dealing with multiple layers of ideas here.
Yeah.
And so we appreciate, and I think the benefit of this sort of post-pandemic engagement strategies, we're doing this in person. So there's going to be a lot of time as we start to refine things that people can look at what we're doing, and we can continue to get that information as we.
Well, here's a question here.
Oh, no, I finished, it's fine. But it's okay.
I was just gonna say, I do appreciate that, you know, on the one hand, I feel like this process is really just kind of getting started. I mean, if I understand the sort of timeline correctly, it was just like a few weeks ago that you had a bit of a kickoff. There were a couple back-to-back, like, you know, housing summits, one in the evening and then one in the afternoon. And then you had a whole week at Tarboro, you got a whole week out here, you got a whole nother week coming up for, I think, the sort of Eastern.
Well, that happened in parallel this week.
Oh, that happened in parallel.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to know, but then I also appreciate knowing that you've been trying to document and get this online for folks to get to it on their own time. You know, obviously, that's, you know, that's another sort of dynamic, you know, you can't even predict, like, how many folks just can't come because of time, right? So I think that's awesome, that's available online for, you know, review and for comment. And then, of course, you know, there's still more coming. It's not like we're one and done, like you were saying. This is an ongoing sort of dialogue, I think, with the community, is what it sounds like. And, you know, we'll have some sort of initial concepts and ideas. This come maybe closer to December, right?
Sort of New Year, January.
So closer to the New Year, January time.
We need some time to really, while we dug around corners for the last couple of weeks, we need to really sort of craft it home.
Oh, yeah.
Really just confirm a lot of what we're doing here.
Well, and I'm not here to rush it. If anything, that's just sort of, like, again, a signal that this is an ongoing dialogue. You're just getting started. You know, you might have some initial concepts and some, you know, more visuals to share come, you know, 2022. So, you know, I appreciate that. Just, you know, for my own sort of peace of mind, to know that there's going to continue to be opportunities for the hundreds, for the thousands of folks, who I'm sure would love to just have an opportunity to kind of see this stuff in process before we like start getting, you know, shovels in the ground and we're, you know, the buses are flying and, you know, we don't know what else.
I want to differentiate the two. The bus system is going to break ground next year. That's already sort of a done deal. This is really about community planning and readying the area for change around that ERT when it opens in 2020.
Well, I appreciate that further sort of clarification as far as, you know, identifying the fact that this improvement in transit service, that's coming, that's happening. But then there's an active and sort of robust effort on behalf of the city and its partners to engage with the communities and the neighborhoods around, which will obviously be impacted. I mean, once you see this sort of investment in space, you know, what comes along with that is a lot of attention, a lot of interest from folks who both live here, but then also don't live here. And so I think the more opportunity we have as those folks who live in and around, kind of work in and around the area, just kind of, you know, be a part of that, I think it's awesome. So just thank you.
I want to add too a couple of points to that. We have some really exciting opportunities next week. We're interfacing with a couple of different student groups at Enloe High School that live in the area and are in school in the area and have a vested interest in pedestrian and bicycle safety getting to and from school. So we're meeting with an advisor of the environmental department, or this, excuse me, the science departments, meeting with the environmental club, a biking club, and the beta club to do civic engagement and outreach. So, you know, reaching the youth too, I think, is a really important piece of this. So we've made some inroads with Enloe. I think that's really exciting for us as well.
I'd love to see that.
Any other questions? Good to see you.
I don't think I'm trying to keep it really right. When you were talking about, because we were talking about station, I was seeing the trees that were like, new trees planted up neighboring on the edges on one of the sides.
The plan conference that we did. Yeah, so, and again, these are sketches, but it's the principle behind it of.
That's it, yeah, I mean, kind of, without the green median, like in the middle of the neighborhood, and then the replacement of that around the station with the trees, or the trees, green circles, look like that's what you guys are doing to start doing to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Try to do that.
I just want to say, like, we have heard loud and clear from every person we've interfaced through this project that the natural beauty of New Bern Avenue is something that we know will be disrupted with the implementation of the new transit infrastructure. But we have the tools in our existing zoning code, and we're using this process to think of how we can use them to get that greenery back. And that's something that I think we can really do.
I
And
guess,
Maggie's got her hand here. Go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
Tommy, sorry.
I guess on that page too, I think we all want to know, like, the whole, and this is surrounding. That's why I think it could be like that. Some of the older, trees and stuff that do, they jewels of the city, I think. And so, I'm just thinking, along the lines of replacing that green space. And also, you talked about some speed, like you're trying to reduce speed on certain roads. I know you showed the pool road picture, but I know Newbern Avenue, we have a lot of that going up and down the road, around the curve and all that. So I'm wondering how are y'all thinking about that? Because I'm thinking when you take the median away, not that doesn't really do anything, but when you take it away, it becomes even more like a highway. And that's what it feel like a highway.
Yeah.
So what are the thoughts on the speed there? Because I know that was a concern, there.
Yeah, that's,
And I guess you kind of can't do a lot because of the emergency.
well,
Let's say
and
that.
BRT design too, right? We have to fit within the NCDOT,
Right.
like, what we're trying to do is where can we control or augment? But also that those ideas of like, can we get them into block crossings that would be signalized or, signalized that would create that slowdown pattern, because people have to stop.
Yeah,
slow down
I
that
think
process.
that's,
So I think it's an overall strategy, and that's a huge box.
I was just gonna say that one of the things that in that cross section that has been discussed too is a pathway on the south side of the street. And so I think, one of the things that also helps people slow down is when they see people out, kind of the reminder that people live here.
Yes, the reality, you're absolutely right. The reality, we do not control speed with stop signs. We do not control speed with police force enforcement. They can't be there 27, 365. Reality is we have to redesign the roads. And we know, you are absolutely right. When you get rid of the trees in them, and honestly, they create that sense of enclosure, don't they? They have that verticality element to it. No one wants to go off the road and hit a tree that's 3 foot in diameter. So we're gonna miss that. We need to do a better job of repurposing that trees. We gotta bring them back on the edges to bring in that sense of enclosure, that verticality. And then people, right? If drivers see high visibility crosswalk, if they see ped countdowns and sidewalks and multi-use paths and people, they're more apt to slow down. But it is gonna be a daunting task. Absolutely. I do think that mid-block there is really important to control speed. One other thing that we need to consider is that traffic control, pedestrian control signal system and program it to 35 miles an hour. So that if you go 35, you continue driving most of the 80% of the time. But if you go 40 or 45 or 50, you're gonna stop and go, stop and go. So we gotta program people almost, those drivers, to be more aware. It's gonna be tough, though. It is tough. Go ahead.
On that, the intersection you're talking about where, when you're talking about speeding, and towards the hospital, I live right in that area.
Mhm.
Right across the country and Newburgh, there's always something like that. And I see what you're saying about, but there's a lot of things like flapping. And I think if we clear all that, still will be that system kind of fast. When I see people, I've seen people walking through there, I've always, personally myself, I've always got around like that way. And we see people walking in downtown. It's like, it's still like that road. And also, it's a concern like, how is that gonna work out? I mean, we can't stop people from going, can't see the speed fish can try to move the system out, so it will enhance the source.
But
But also, there's something that needs to be, concerned. Like you said, the big trees up that, you say trees.
And curb and gutter, helps. Right now, it's a ditch section. Yeah, curb and gutter, and that's a little bit of, no one wants to have curb. The lanes, you don't need anything more than 11 feet, I'm throwing that out there.
Oh, no.
No, we don't, because any truck and tractor trailer, SUV, emergency fire rescue, don't need anything more than 11. If you put out 13, 14 feet, which is out there, that's what.
Are you talking about like frozen leaves like that?
No, those are
That's building.
She's like, that's a bridge too far. Craig, I wanted, Biden Walter, Raleigh City Planning, I wanted to ask a clarifying question about an expression you've been using tonight. You have at times said all above and above all. And I think the idiom you're channeling is all of the above,
All of the, sorry.
which is to indicate that there is no silver bullet for any of these issues, right? It takes a cocktail. I think Simone used the toolkit expression earlier, and I just wanted to say that out because the first couple times you said that, I was like, what the heck is he talking about? But I just wanted to say out loud, you're referencing all of the above, that it's a mixed bag, not a silver bullet.
Yeah, I equate it to 3D chess too. It's like there's all these sort of moving parts. And we often think very binary. Well, if we do this one thing, it's going to fix everything. And what we're really expressing in our plan is let's make sure that it's voiced and communicated of all of the options, that there's an educational opportunity that everyone learns what their options are, and then we all work together to understand how that ends. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope that what people are taking away is that whatever the issue is, whether it's housing affordability, or whether it's speeding and pedestrian safety, or whether it's the trees and natural beauty, those are things we have heard very clearly. And we're at a conceptual stage now, but as we move forward and get to a final result, those are going to be the subject of intense thought and consideration to get the best possible outcomes in all those regards.
So how can we, as residents, that maybe those residents that are very concerned about the natural environment, kind of preserving the character of the neighborhoods, while supporting growth and redevelopment, we want to do that, but at the same time preserving the, basically a natural habitat for lots of animals and plants and that whole ecosystem. That's what, the Longview Gardens area, the homes with large yards, we have, yes, integrated area, we have fruit trees, we have gardens, we have all that, bees can pollinate with flowers. So in order to preserve that natural area, how can we as residents go forward and make a difference in saying that we want to support this, but how can you guys help preserve what's important to us while this is all important? But this is a bigger picture. We're talking about removing all these trees, but hey, let's keep these, keep as much grass and fruit trees and gardens as we can, on streams. I know they have a lot of stuff, but they're natural areas. So if you guys can, that's part of being here. How can we can say what we like and what we want and what we're afraid of or what we support. But how can we make a difference? Or are we just here, just to hear you guys say this? What can we actually do to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods around without sounding like we don't support the program?
So, sorry.
Because I think when you might see all this, I think of losing a lot of green, and you're getting a lot of cement. I want to be like a big old cement area, I want to see is cement green streets. Yeah,
Yeah.
versus you can do that with, incorporating. So, keep the greenery coming in and incorporate it in there, so it doesn't look like a giant open linen strip.
Yeah, if I can take this and then make a comment, I just want to say, how can you make your voice heard and how can you participate is You can come here. This right now is a presentation of what we've heard all week, but there will be continuous engagement opportunities. And you don't always have to come and show up. You can find them online. You can do them from home. There are surveys and ways for you to do that. And every iteration of this process, we're going to have touch points with the community where we'll check in with you and you can provide feedback. And in terms of how we get more green spaces after we added lane to New Bern, we'll intentionally plant trees back as a part of this process too. So that will happen, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, there's some great tree commercials. I've had trees planted by the city of my yard
Nick, you wanted to say something, and then Maggie.
Well, I was just gonna, I think, say in response, and kind of a follow-up to this, I think, great comment about how can we be involved, and like, how can we, stay involved and make sure that, these thoughts we're sharing, continue to be integrated into like what we see moving forward. Like, and what exactly are y'all doing to kind of follow through on that, like on tonight, on everything, as we continue with this process. And I guess my sort of gut level sense is that, I think by us being here right now and like clearly communicating, I mean, all of this is like being recorded, it's on record. I know that you've had a number of folks from, our City of Raleigh planning office here. You've got folks who consult with the city to, further advise and inform them about the ultimate, concepts and designs and the ways in which everything that we're talking about should be, a few months from now. We should see it, we should see everything we've given a voice to a few months from now in pictures up on the wall. And then the thing is, if we don't see it, well, that's when we begin to hold people accountable, because it's like, see, I know I said something about those streets, or I know I said I don't want to live, in this like urbanized cement village. Okay. And so I think, I guess, again, at a gut level, I feel like, the fact that we are here right now, just trying to communicate how we're feeling, like all of this should be integrated into the design, into the plans that we see moving forward. And then, of course, again, if we don't see it, right, it's back on us to speak up and say something. Because again, I think you've got folks here from across various departments and, folks who work with the city who do care, and they are, I think, listening. And I'd like to believe that the impact they're trying to make is a positive. They're trying to invest, in our community and sort of improve the way we get about, our community, how we get from home to work or from home to parks or from home just to, get out and play, go out to a restaurant, go eat somewhere. So anyway, that's just, I love the comment. I love just the concern.
One thing I want to mention is that this area is blessed with one of the largest natural untouched areas in the city of Raleigh, which is the floodplain along the Factory Creek, and home to a lot of wildlife. This project there's a greenway that goes through and thinking about making some really sensitive connections. So it's easier for people who live here to walk or bike to that greenway and enjoy that beautiful area. We also know that it's really important to have those type of spaces embedded in the neighborhood. And so you saw some slides that illustrate some plans for that. And of course, we definitely are going to be working hard on New Bern itself. And that's a really key part of this plan is to maximize the amount of green along this street.
Just sort of two comments on that. I think that's, at least from the design team perspective, there were a couple of themes that kept coming up in response to that too, which is like why that sort of activity park area that we talked about, tying that into connections and making it easier to get to green spaces. I'm sure that was an important paragraph of that. And then the second thing that I thought was actually one of the really exciting conversations that happened was just understanding all of the tools that already exist in the Raleigh zoning code for frontages that protect green space and the potential to use that here. So I think that's really, there are some great tools that the city, from the city that we can leverage to protect those kinds of things in perpetuity. That's a real opportunity here.
And I would say a frontage in our zoning terminology means that when there's some change on the property, the amount of space that's left between the building and the street and the amount of landscaping and trees that are required as a part of this.
It's also the floodplain that's
with increased development, even if you could mitigate the concrete village thing, and I think you could very easily substitute. I prefer concrete village to suburban, so there's a lot of opportunity there. But with that development, there'd be a requirement for more drainage.
Oh, yes.
And so then there is the floodplain. And what they did in Texas is they would just build on the floodplain, a caveat emptor. That's not the way to do it. But there should, is there any floodplain maps where, okay, if we develop this, can we expand
We
the
haven't done,
definition of the floodplain
well, floodplain is defined by state.
by state? Yeah.
Yeah, we mapped that, and in fact, in the last year, city council pretty dramatically decreased what can happen on or near a floodplain. So that could have been a recommendation that came out of this, had that action not already taken place.
And already taken place. So that's on the, so that's what we can hold them accountable. So that when we go to the BOA and someone wants a variance to build on a floodplain, we can shut that down.
You're saying they decrease, right?
Right, decrease the amount of development that can
So
occur,
they-
not decrease they increased regulation.
Right.
So
This story goes
they
on.
decrease the amount of development. Okay.
Right.
It's a little
Sorry,
bit-
yeah,
maybe I phrased that in a
No,
sad
that's okay.
way.
No, it's okay. They decrease the amount of development, so they're preventing.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah, over the last several decades, we've gotten a lot more sensitive,
Yeah,
and this dates back several decades, about how we use that land in those floodplains. We've understood much better the connection that they have to water quality and nature, and over time, have gradually placed more and more restrictions on what can be done there. And I think what happened in the last year is probably the most dramatic in the city of Raleigh in terms of completely limiting what can happen.
Well, I was gonna suggest that, because I think the visuals help a lot, and I mean, this helps, a lot of the streetscaping, the street level view versus the aerial view, that made a big difference for me. But I was gonna suggest that maybe, you were getting the sort of affordability tools. Sorry, to breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I know, it's tough.
Is if you could vignette, various residents living in this area, in this new space. So,
Oh, like new residents who we have.
and old, and that, the reason I thought of it was because of, your comment about how can we support, the change happening, we still live here, and it shows it, maybe from what it looked like in years, whatever it was. I think it could also, I think it would help for people to see, the change in a positive view, to see how they can exist in the change, and I think also to drive engagement. If I know that a playground is, maybe gonna be close to me, I mean, I think that, the story of taking their kids to the playground and then going to the, whatever the story is, you guys can do it better. Whatever I'm talking about. But I think it would be helpful to potential residents who want to move here and are excited about whatever they envision their life, but to current residents also.
Yeah, can you see yourself here?
Yeah.
Or see something that you like within that? And I have to say that, thank you for this
Like
conversation.
a day in the life.
Yeah,
But you different.
yeah, like a little walking pattern, some economic profile, or people profiles.
Walking across 440, that overpass.
Yeah.
That should work.
And I have to say, I had to drive across 440 every day at 8 o'clock this week, and we saw at least 3 to 5 people walking
Yeah.
those paths.
Yeah.
We saw an accident on the first day. But I have to say too, that thank you for your time this week too. You really painted a picture about your neighbors and the stories that you have, and that really is playing into, the concept of, I want to live here, but my neighbors may, continue care, they may have to go to hospice or a nursing home eventually, and want to know that their children understand what to do with the land, or that they have options and understanding that, but making sure that if that does so, that you can still feel comfortable in your parcel of land, knowing that if things do redevelop, that there's protections within that redevelopment scheme.
Those children, they don't live there, so what will they, whatever the deal is on it, or.
Right. So yeah, the big theme of education and options, and how does everybody participate within this is gonna be really important. Yes, ma'am.
On the hope that the owners of the businesses, the shopping center will update, upgrade, redevelop their parcels. Are they getting incentives? Are they being cooperative? Say like, for example, Longview Shopping Center area, for example, the Tower Shopping Center area in the park, because I was up there at the other one today.
Oh, good.
And I like that development up there because that's already concrete,
Yeah.
that it's not like a lot of grass and like, but that's ready for, something new that will make that BRT line, that will give you somewhere else to go, okay? Because it's coming, so, okay. What incentives is the city giving? So how does that happen? Because we're talking about it in theory, South Area.
Well,
So how are they being incentivized to do something to their properties?
Right, so basically what this plan will produce is a set of policy recommendations that says what should happen in the future if a piece of property should redevelop. And so we're going to talk about zoning, land uses, and building height for these areas, Tower, the maps and stuff you see here. And we'll have a policy that says, if you come to rezone and redevelop your property, this should be the outcome. So that's kind of what we're working on here is a public policy that will be used by city council to change a law to allow someone to build something differently.
And then also on like the small businesses that I see that I'd love to see thrive and survive, do they have opportunities for, I've seen like there's like grants that the city does for, doing some work on places, but within this BRT project, is your money set aside for these businesses if they are willing to do that and can cooperate?
Yeah, Jason, you take your.
Well, just real quick, again, I love these observations and questions because, we're all sort of participating in some fashion, with this sort of ongoing, development of our community. And just personally speaking, to the question of, businesses and what sort of incentives or encouragements coming from the city to develop and redevelop along this corridor. Speaking from experience over the last 10 years of being involved with small businesses, restaurants, bars, creative studios. I can speak to a present day conversation that is happening right now, where you've got owners, you've got managers, developers who are actively looking at this investment along the corridor and seeing in their eyes. And again, I'm in these conversations with folks, but these are improvements coming to this corridor where we can not only anticipate improved, flow of traffic, but people being able to get out of their homes and feel like they can walk safely to a restaurant, to a bar, feel like they can bike safely to a restaurant, to a bar. And people are actively looking at engaging these various shopping centers and just, you see the sort of present day mix of businesses. But they're all being actively engaged right now as far as what can we do to kind of spruce things up, because we're going to have an opportunity to really capture some new guests coming through, and there's a lot of excitement, I would say. I mean, I've got folks who made it through the pandemic by the skin of their teeth, but they are actively saying, you know what, I've had a great run here with this company. I'm going to step aside and open up my own new business now because I see the opportunity. So I feel like, to a degree, you could argue that the city council's recent decision on a transit-oriented, development and corridor and plan, that's an incentive and an encouragement to small business owners who see the opportunity. You can look at somebody like Ashley Christensen, where she's just opened up this, or she's getting ready to. I think it's coming this week or next week. BB's Chicken, her new chicken shop, this chicken sandwich shop over here in Midtown East. Well, she's doing it because of the investment and the improvement in the area around. You know what I'm saying? Like she feels good about stepping out. And I can tell you, I know folks who are looking at this right now, like, oh, restaurants, bars, cafes, we just can't wait. And so I think it's coming.
And I'll say specifically, so this planning around the New Bern area or the New Bern station areas is really a second phase of land use planning we've already done. We did a project that finished up in 2019 that's called Equitable Development Around Transit. And that plan had a recommendation to create what's called an equity fund. And that is currently working through our management and budget office to identify how we can raise and set aside money to in the city's tax roll to fund business grants, to fund worker education, to fund internship and apprenticeship programs for areas specifically in these BRT corridors. So we're looking at ways to bring more money to the table to have these business incentives like you're saying. And that's all part of it as well.
We're meeting some business owners in the West tomorrow to end that conversation. We've had a lot of stakeholder group conversations with business owners as well. And part of this plan is to really put that in. That's why I keep saying education, opportunity, how does everybody participate within this? I think that's going to be a really big key thing that we look forward. To your point on how do we incentivize to fund this, it's already happening. Developers are already buying these. The retail is transforming globally, like nationally. COVID accelerated what was already happening. Strip malls and centers and suburban retrofits are just going to continue to happen because our society is focusing on experience over land, because they want to live in a connected community and have those opportunities to get out of their home and be with people. And even more post-pandemic, I think we all want to be able to sit on a terrace in a restaurant and not have to wear a mask walking in. I'm looking forward to that day personally. So it's about making sure we have the right tools for things like open space, landscaping, making sure we retain that component while we are permissive to that component. I think it's a win.
I do want to just check in and say it's 7:30. We've been at this for an hour and a half. We can keep going, but if you've got what you came here to get, we will invite you to leave. That is something that interests you. Otherwise, we can keep these conversations going, but this is not the last time you'll hear or receive from us. This process will be going on for some time.
And please sign in if you haven't already, that'd be great. Stay in touch.
Sign out.
Sign in, sign out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you.
Yeah.